All right, so on to our first session. There's an adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we're kind of rewriting that. I guess org design eats strategy for brunch, lunch, whatever you want to say. But if a team isn't organized, so incentives are aligned with key business goals and customer satisfaction, it becomes extremely hard to succeed. And it's even more so as organizations grow and more people are involved. So I'm really excited about this topic, and I'm really grateful that Rick Lockton is here. He's the SVP of eCommerce and Omnichannel at Tractor Supply. And here to interview Rick is Sucharita Kodali. She is a good friend of Commerce Next. She is the VP and Head Retail Analyst at Forrester Research. So please join me in welcoming Rick and Sucharita.
And Rick, thank you for being here from Nashville.
Sure, I'm excited to be here.
So I don't know if everybody knows Tractor Supply, but they should. So can you give a quick 30-second overview of the company and your role there, because you're relatively new?
Yeah, I'd love to. For many of you who have not been in a Tractor Supply, we are a 75-year young company. We've got 2,200 stores right now with another 700 or so on the way. We're in 49 states, about to be 50. And then we have another 200 stores under our Pet Sense brand, which is a pet specialty store. We are a lifestyle company that really focuses on what we call the life out here customer. So typically rural America, where customers have land and animals. And we have all sorts of products. I've been asked many times, do we sell tractors? We do have one tractor in our assortment, but for the most part, we are selling what we call consumable, usable, and edible products, which, I grew up in mass merchandising. It's kind of like the grocery and consumables business and a mass merch. That drives the traffic to the store and recurring visits, and then we have all the other products that go complement that for projects and workwear and whatnot.
And the other thing that I would add is that Tractor Supply is like one of the best performing stocks in the retail industry right now. I think that you're at your high ever, right? Like you're at the peak. So what is your role at Tractor Supply? Because you are relatively new. You joined just a few months ago.
Yeah, so I've been with the company about 9 months or so. I lead the e-com team, which is a blend of business, tech, product, and master data. And so we own kind of all the digital channels, which, we've got a web experience and a mobile app, and then our customers interact with us through digital experiences in the store and outside of the store. And so we own all of those and the P&L that goes along with it.
And so what is the relationship of your team to IT, marketing, and buying and planning?
Yeah, great question. So I report into the CIO, which is, there are lots of different setups. I've been at a few different companies in similar roles. Never reported to the CIO before, so interesting dynamics there when we talk about org structure and how things work. My boss has a peer that leads marketing, and so we have teams within that group that are dedicated both to top of funnel but also bottom of funnel marketing that are more oriented to my areas. And then I have my own merchandising team that's working on sourcing new products and assortment for our digital channels, and I have a peer that runs merchandising for the brick and mortar side. But we're oriented the same way. All my merchants roll up to the same categories and departments, and so in some regards they sort of dotted line into the DMMs in those areas and operate as a team.
So tell me about the CIO connection, because that, to your point, it's an interesting one. It's not always where digital sits. So what do you think are the pros and cons? And just for background, Rick was previously at Ashley Furniture and Walmart for many years.
Yeah, so I've seen a little bit of everything. The beauty of it in my current situation, obviously e-commerce relies heavily on technology to build our customer experiences. Being close to the team that's accountable to that and has the dollars to get it done is super helpful. So if I ever have issues, like we're all reporting to the same person. It eliminates finger pointing. You work much more as a team when you're on the same page in that way, so that's been great. The thing I need to balance is being close to the business and make sure that my merchants and operators and whatever we're prioritizing aligns with the broader ship. So I'm only about 7% of total company sales. The brick and mortar team and experience really still drives the revenue of the business. And so I need to take their lead on company strategies, customer strategies, and things like that. And so making sure we stay connected, even if I don't report to that team, is pretty important.
Right. And that would be my question is, it's nice to be close to the CIO, but on the other hand, do you end up being a redheaded stepchild because there's the POS system and kind of the core mothership functions that are often where they're the ones that get the most oxygen.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm very fortunate in a couple of regards at Tractor Supply. Our CEO, Hal, had sort of my role in a previous company. So he understands both the role of e-commerce and digital, but also how it fits within the broader picture. Our chief merchant previously had my role at Tractor Supply. So when you have leaders that have been in sort of the startup incubation part of the business, they understand the dynamics that need to be available to let that business grow, but to also make sure it ultimately comes into fold with the broader picture. So that's been really nice to have.
So when you joined, you basically executed some org changes. And I'm curious to hear what led to that. And what was the before scenario and what was the after scenario that you were looking to achieve?
Yeah, so like many of the other retailers in the room, we grew really fast during COVID. And I guess the priorities that we needed to work on and capabilities and strategies of the team were obvious at the time because we were behind where we needed to be. And so in some regards, in order to go fast, we threw bodies at the problem, but didn't really think through structurally, does this make sense and does this allow us to scale? And so now that we're sort of catching our breath in a post-COVID area and trying to figure out like what does long-term growth look like, there were a lot of areas that were just not optimized and that we needed to fix.
What are some examples?
Yeah, so a couple of the big ones. There are processes that are required to work really well in order to enable the team to go fast. Adding new items and vendors is a big role of an e-commerce team. I had 3 different teams accountable to portions of that process of getting new vendors and items set up, which meant it took about 2 or 3 months to get a new item or a vendor added to the website, which just isn't fast enough to keep up in a digital world. And so we changed ownership. We gave one team end-to-end ownership. They now have metrics that they're accountable and that we can measure. And so it makes it much easier to get progress on the metrics that matter in some of the work. We also grew very fast in a way that we didn't have a lot of subject matter expertise in really key or important areas of the business. And so we made some kind of outside investments in areas where we thought bringing some talent from outside the company that had seen what good looks like at another company would allow us to accelerate and go faster, while still trying to make sure we leverage all of the internal relationships and the track record that the team internally had, put together over the last few years.
So I want to ask you about the internal versus external hire question, because I think that that's something that executives everywhere often grapple with. And one of the worries, I think, with bringing in those external hires is the organ rejection, right? And whether or not the organization is willing to embrace some of these new approaches. So my question to you is, what are, and kind of think of it from the standpoint of advice to the audience, what are the characteristics that enable somebody from the outside to be successful, and what is the culture that is that the CEO on down needs to have to enable it?
I guess from past experience, I've seen both where a new leader comes in and replaces the entire team, and my experience in that was, when you bring people in that don't know the company culture, don't have the relationships, it actually slows things down quite dramatically. So I think it's really important to have a balanced,
completely the house. Okay.
Yeah, you got to have a balance where those internal relationships and understanding how things work and who to go to for what is incredibly important. So you've got to be thoughtful in making, the investments with outside talent where it matters the most. I guess from somebody outside coming in standpoint, it's really tough when you're coming in. You really want to show you can add value quickly and that you can move fast and all these kinds of things. But if you don't build the relationships first, really understand what the priorities of the business are, who your stakeholders are, and how they're going to help you or stand in your way, you'll ultimately not be successful long term. So it's one of those that you've got to give new leaders enough time to onboard and really kind of assimilate within the company before you start pushing hard on results and getting execution done. So I think to leadership, you've got to be patient, and you've got to know that if you're going to go that route, that you've got to give new leaders time to onboard and actually become a part of the organization before you start pushing too hard.
And that was going to be one of my questions as you were talking about the company obviously moved very, very fast during COVID, and there were probably some, kind of obvious ways where there were opportunities for improvement. But on the other hand, I'm going to play devil's advocate, because what I imagine is that some of the team is probably looking at the stock price and they're like, we're doing just fine. Why do we need to change anything? Because clearly what we've done so far has worked really well. So how do you make the case that things need to change? And, or was it, kind of were you brought in specifically to change these things?
I mean, the team had a really great track record without me here, so I think I'm here to help accelerate and open up new opportunities that the team hadn't thought about. I think that's been the greatest part of my role. Having been at other companies, I can see areas that we've underinvested in or just haven't been a priority, and so the fruit is, I wouldn't say laying on the ground, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can take advantage of. It's really about prioritizing and deciding what to go after first. So I guess my approach to doing that, we've tried to kind of outline the business end to end and identify the key metrics that we think drive the business, and then assess where are we at, like what's our baseline and what does the best in class in the industry look like. So we could identify like where are the areas of the business that we could make the most progress, and if we can't do everything, which ones are we going to go after this year? So
how do you do your benchmarking?
Oh gosh, lots of different ways. A blend of working with outside partners and researchers in the industry. We've hired quite a few people that have been at other companies, so now we've got touch points with other companies that have done many of these things, and so we can see where they're at. So anyway, lots of different ways to kind of skin it and approach it, but it's really useful if you can take a metrics-based approach, because then you're out of kind of opinion mode and trying to decide like what are doing favors for one leader or another in the company.
So channel conflict, internal channel conflict at large. I know that, kind of we don't like the term omnichannel, but it's an important one. So when we're looking at the relationships between the store and the digital channel, that is still something that I hear often a lot of tension in terms of making sure that all the channels work together and are aligned. What is your advice for making that as smooth as possible, and how are you guys handling it right now at Tractor Supply?
I think it's really important to define the role of digital or e-commerce in the business. When I joined Tractor Supply, my main metric of success was my top line sales target that I needed to go after, and with a margin target as well. And we stepped back and said, there's probably actually 4 roles in the company that I'm accountable to, or my team's accountable to, and so we've kind of broadened out now how we're measured and evaluated for success. So for example,
it's more than just the revenue line.
Correct, yeah. So for example, our stores are mostly in rural parts of the country, so if you don't live in a rural part of the country, you don't even know the brand. So in some regards, my digital channel is a marketing channel and a communication vehicle about our brand and the experience with our stores and the products that we sell. And so we now have metrics that relate to kind of how are we communicating that brand, attracting new customers to the brand and things like that. We play a pretty critical role of connecting a digital experience to the stores. So we have some metrics that relate to customers who are shopping across channels. How frequently are they shopping across channels? If a transaction started online but finished in the store, that's still a win for us, even though it may not hit our P&L. Our third is really an expansion of the product lines and assortment that we sell. Our stores are constrained by square footage, but online we're not. So it provides a testing ground to go after new items and brands that we may not have considered or really were interested in, but weren't ready to take the big bet to put it in the store. So it can provide an avenue to test those out. And then the fourth is we are building a handful of new digital businesses that will grow a P&L that can be reinvested into the core business. So retail media sits underneath me. We have a couple other kind of startup-y businesses that over time will grow into something more meaningful and then we can use to reinvest. So where I started, I was originally a sales and margin primarily as my metric of success. And now we've got a pretty diversified portfolio that makes sure we're not only focusing on our P&L, but we're doing what's right for the broader company.
And it sounds like that none of that should be as threatening to the store as maybe, kind of a straight up revenue line item.
That's right, yeah. And, some of it's about, who do you recruit to the team and what's their background. I grew up in brick and mortar, and so I really understand that business pretty well. 80% of my sales right now are fulfilled at or through the stores. So if I neglect that part of the business, like my business will suffer as a result. So anyway, I think it's really important to just understand each of the different parts of the business and how your role is going to impact their metrics and what's important to them.
And so how do these metrics compare to some of the previous organizations that you've been at? Is this a new, kind of a completely new paradigm? Did you pull some of this from your previous experience? Did you pull the best of? And what's a worst of to avoid?
So Walmart's been through multiple phases. So, when I was there, e-commerce was a completely separate business unit. They merged the teams a few years ago, but they still manage a separate P&L for the e-com team. So I don't know if there's like a best in class. I think every company is different and has to have a different approach depending on what their needs are.
So what's the case to have, to kind of silo e-com and to, have it completely separate?
Well, if you don't incubate startup arms, they just get neglected. So I was a part of multiple teams at Walmart that if you included it in the mothership, it never would have been, a priority for the rest of the team. So one of my first roles there was building new store formats. So Walmart has lots of big stores. We still wanted to grow our real estate footprint, and I worked on a team that built 15,000 square foot stores that you would put in an urban environment or rural area. If you had just given over like the merchandising strategy to the merchant team, and if you're a buyer that owns $1 billion, business, and now you're asked to, merchandise 10 or 20 startup businesses that may deliver $1 million or $2 million, like you'll spend 5 minutes on it. And so it kind of predetermines success of a new venture if you don't put the right dedication and time to it. But then, when these things grow and they become 10, 15% of sales, now it's a meaningful part of the business, and the core business really needs to understand how that works, how the customer is transitioning across channels and how to grow that. And so then there's obviously a case to kind of merge them at some point. And then you really just need to think through, like, what are the skill sets that somebody would need to know to optimize in a brick and mortar channel versus an e-com channel? Do they have the bandwidth to be able to do that? And do they have the tools that are required to actually make good decisions and still run the business?
So innovation sits under your team, and of course, everybody is constrained by just your headcount, right? I mean, everybody would love to have twice as many employees. So how do you think about the build versus buy question, especially with respect to innovation and some of these new business lines?
A couple things, we have 200 or more ideas of things that we could use to go grow the business. We try and take a testing and get to market really quick mentality and then go big on the things that we see actually working. So we've created sort of a muscle that allows us to test a lot of different things and then really go big on the ones that matter. So that helps quite a bit.
What's been some of the big wins that you, retail media, I assume?
Retail media has grown 2,000% in the last year. So, I mean, it's a very, luckily we have others in the industry who have already shown what good looks like, and so we can ride their coattails. We've got a very unique customer segment, so our suppliers love being able to go after our customers because they don't find them in a lot of other retailers, which is kind of nice. So that'd be a good example. We've got lots of tests on the front end part of the site that we're working on. I worked in a high consideration category. So I was in the furniture industry right before here. We had a sales chat feature where a large portion of our sales really came through, somebody communicating directly with a customer and helping them make a decision on a purchase that they only make once every few years, and that's pretty expensive. Like something that historically you would think a customer would want to go to the store and see a couch or lay on a bed before buying it. And so we had a hypothesis that this could be useful at Tractor in some of our high consideration categories. We saw a lot of Tractor ride-on lawnmowers, zero-turn mowers. There's several $1,000 purchases that you make once every 5 to 7 years, so it's not something you know all the features of. We had two approaches. We could just say, we want to do this and go build it, or we could just launch something and see if there's a demand for it. So we basically put what my head of product calls a painted door. So we basically, we put a banner that said, hey, you want some help? Click here and we can chat with you about it. If a customer clicked on it, it would just say, hey, this feature's coming soon, we'll follow up with you. But it at least allowed us to gauge, is there a customer demand for something like this? It took us, an hour to put that on the site, where we could have spent 3 months going and building something that ultimately didn't solve a customer problem. So anyway, it's a good example of how can you move fast and then really invest in the things that matter.
Yeah, that's great, and that's good insight. And speaking of some of the chat applications, Tractor has invested in some Gen AI, and that is a topic that we've spent a lot of time in the last day speaking about. So share some of the, because I know there are a few different kind of solutions here.
Yeah. AI is obviously like really coming to life lately, and we wanted to be out ahead and try and really understand how can we leverage this. I think from our standpoint, we tried to prioritize the things that really aligned with our company strategy and customer strategy. Tractor is really well known for what we call legendary experience or legendary customer service in the store. Customers shop our stores because our team members generally are customers. They know the products really well. And so it just leads to a really great experience. We wanted to expand that. We've got a lot of categories that are new to the store that we've turned over product, and so it's hard to always stay on top of the new changes, the features, and brands that we've got. And so we created in the store a application called Hey GURA. So GURA is an acronym that our stores use. It's greet, uncover, recommend, ask, and appreciate. So it really just helps them kind of work through that experience with the customer. We have a Gen AI tool that basically allows a customer, if the team member doesn't know the answer to a question, they can ask Hey GURA, like, hey, I have a customer who has a dog that has a skin allergy. What would be the best product for them to buy? And then it'll provide.
So it's an associate-facing tool, and it is voice-activated.
That's right. And then it'll provide a recommendation back with the rationale of why, and then the team member can help the customer with that. Good example of like if you build AI as in a platform or a product, now I can leverage that online for some of the sales chat functionality that I mentioned earlier. Another good example, we have a lot of brands and products that are not in a lot of retailers, and so their digital content is not as good as you would see as like a CPG firm. A couple examples here, we've got like a hay trough. The image that we would receive from our supplier would just be on a white plain background, which isn't very compelling. We had a hunch that if you made it more of a lifestyle image and showed how that product would be used in real life, that it might drive sales. So we used Gen AI to go create some of those images, get them on the site, and understand if it helps with conversion. Another category, it did. Some of these things are interesting. It's hard to A/B test some of these things. And we have a lot of seasonality in our business, so we're still watching it to decide. I think what it'll really come down to is like, what's the investment required to go scale that? A lot of these, once you put them together, the scalability is pretty easy. So if the cost is minimal, even if you only see a little bit of uplift, it's generally worth it.
Great. And the second example?
Yeah, the second example is another kind of high consideration category. This is a gun safe. It's probably a $900 gun safe. When you're on a PLP and you're looking at a bunch of different items and having a hard time deciding, we thought it might be interesting to put the key product features in more visual format next to the image. So on the right, you'll see what that looks like. It's helping get customers more to the PDP and items in the basket. So anyway, lots of kind of interesting tests going on that we think we'll continue to lean into.
Oh, great, and I could ask you more, but we are out of time. So Rick, thank you so much. I think that one last thing, though, is that you guys are hiring, right?
Oh yeah, we are growing like crazy. So this is a QR code to our site if anyone's interested. We are located in Nashville, Tennessee, which is like the new Austin, and so it's been really fun to be able to recruit to Nashville. But yes, I'd welcome anyone who's interested in careers to reach out.
Yeah, it's a fun city, and Taylor Swift lives there, right? So.
And many others, yes.
So thank you all, and thank you, Rick.